she's like amazing, amazing, creative, informational fountain. She's Shinnecock, and she's descended from the Montauk people as well. And she's also African American. And there are just so many things to say, but I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to introduce her. Chenae.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here. Wow, I love this setup. Nadasawi Sakampanayu Mashuna Tuyusqua, Natchashayawonk Shinnecock, Montaukett. My given name is I Lead Canoe. I am Butterfly Woman, and I come from the people of the Stony Shores, right there in what is known as Southampton, New York. How many of you all have heard of the Shinnecock people? Oh, okay, all righty. How many of you all have heard of the Montauk people? All right, awesome. Well, we're still here. We haven't gone anywhere. We have never left our territory. And so that land acknowledgement was really beautiful. So I don't have to actually do a land acknowledgement because I'm here, right? So the land is acknowledged. So today I just wanted to really just kind of really just have a conversation and a dialogue. If you notice that you're sitting in a circle, right? Because the conversation today is to help elevate our consciousness as humanity, not just as an Indigenous woman, a queer person, you know, or, you know, African American, a child, a dog, a bird, whatever it is. That responsibility that we have to the water is all of our responsibility. And so when we sit in a circle like this, we don't know who is really in charge, right? But we know that there's like a responsibility that we have to each other. So that's why when we do things, we do it in a very circular way. Everything in our body on us, right, is in round. Your shoulders, they're not square. Some of us might have broad shoulders, but everything is trying to make a perfect circle, just like a water drop, you know? And so I wanted us to be able to sit in this circle so that it can kind of remind us to be in that, to physically be a part of something together and collectively. So I will be sharing with you all many teachings from my community. And not only just my community, but my teachers. And so some of that is going to be about the discussion of water. Some of that's going to be a little heavy, right? And so as we go through this, we'll do a little bit of breath work as well, so that we can be present. But I just ask that you kind of silence your phones, be as present as you can, get very, very comfortable, you know, and whatever comfortability it is. Because, you know, it looks like we're all adults here. So now we have like little kids here. But sometimes as adults, we get so serious, you know. And the conversations that I'm talking about is really about something that's so natural, right? So I want to start out with that creation story. The creation stories, and I say stories, plural, because every Indigenous community around the world usually has some sort of a creation story. What that creation story is, well, we have to hear it from them. We're now in a time that is, I can actually legally share this creation story with you all. There was once a time that it was actually illegal to share that creation story. It was actually illegal to speak in my language the way that I greeted you, right in the very area and land of my homelands that we're essentially standing in. And so that's truly an honor to be able to have my elders and teachers have preserved this gift, which is the story, to be able to come to me, and through me, through my mother and through my teachers, to be able to share with each and every one of you. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is so ancient. It's like way back into time, back in the olden days, back in the golden days. These stories and these teachings that I'm going to be sharing as we go through, they are from those times. So I just ask that when I'm sharing this, to be as open-minded and respectable as you can, because it's hard, because we have a lot of bias, just naturally, right? And so that's why when I share this story, I'm saying that because it's very sacred. So it's almost like bringing something old out and just asking you to just be very respectful about it. So the story of my people, there's so many different parts of the creation story, which can take 7 days to tell you. But I don't think you guys have 7 days to sit in the same chairs, right? No? Okay. In our lodges, we usually take breaks. You go out, you come back in, and, it goes into the night. And it usually goes for 4 days, our stories. And those creation stories are told that long, and that's where we get our teachings. And so, but this story is about a woman. It's about a woman, and she comes from the sky. And so at one point in time, there was this huge, huge storm that took place, this big, huge, storm in the world, in the galaxy, in the universe, as big as you can think that the universe was, that's what it was. And those constellations that are, that we understand, in a small way today, we really understand, we really are still trying to figure all that out, right, today. But at one point in time, there was so much vast knowledge just like that, where all those stars were, where the sun was, where the moon was. And there was this woman that fell all the way from the sky, and she fell all the way down. And it took her a substantial amount of time to get down here, right? And when she came here, there was no land. So what happened? She fell into the water. And she fell into the water, and in that water, this big turtle, rose her up and brought her up. And on that turtle, she was able to be okay. Of course, she was soaking wet, in a very new place, not knowing much. But there was so much life in the water, right? The whale was there. Everyone, all of the creatures were coming together to figure out, whoa, we just have this new woman here, and we have to figure out how to save her because she can't swim forever like we can. So they all kind of counseled among themselves. You had the eagle, you had all of the different the winged, you had the eagle, you had all the different birds, you had the muskrat, you had the otter, you had the whales, you had the porpoise, you had all these different animals, the different fish and the animals that lived in there, and they all counseled together, and they said, what are we going to do? This woman came from here. She can't live in the place that we live in. What are we going to do? And so they counseled, and they said, you know what? Let's have a race. Let's have a big, huge race to see who can go to the bottom of the ocean and get mud, and let's put that mud on top of the turtle. And that mud is what we can use to make land. Yeah, let's do it. So they all took these diving contests off of the turtle's back while she was sitting there. But she came here, too. This is very important to remember in this entire story. She came here with the teachings about the responsibility here in this place of Mother Earth. She came here with those teachings. So she started to share what those teachings were to the turtle while they were having this diving contest. So the whale dives. Whale's huge, splashes everything. Turtle's all moving around, and she's just like, she's still telling the story, and he just can't go down all the way, He just comes back up, breaches. Every animal is just like spread out all over the whole vast ocean. And so he didn't succeed, so he didn't win, right? And then you had the otter try to. Otter's very smart, quick, fast, can get around, slither around, just couldn't dive deep enough. Then you had, a few other animals. The fish tried, little small ones, really fast ones, sharks, they all tried. And they all go back up to where the turtle is, and they said, we just can't do it. They're all out of breath. And the teeny little, cute little muskrat, right? Doesn't really have these huge, vast lungs like the whale and all of that, but he's quick, he's small, but more importantly, he believed in himself. So he goes all the way down to the depths of the ocean, and he goes all the way down, and he holds his breath, and he's down for a really, really long time. And everybody's like, where the heck is the muskrat at? And she's just still telling this beautiful story to the turtle. At this point in time, she's not just telling it to the turtle. She's telling it to all of the animals about the instructions on how we're supposed to be living on Earth. She's telling it to all of them. So the muskrat goes all the way down, and finally, out of nowhere, the muskrat comes up. And when the muskrat comes up, there's no bubbles. The muskrat, had hands full of mud, feet full of mud, ears full of mud, body full of mud, and everybody was just kind of saddened a little bit to say, whoa, this muskrat risked the life for this woman and the land. And they were able to take the offerings of this mud and spread it among themselves, and they began to cover what is known today as Turtle Island. But she had something to plant in that turtle, and that was what came from where she came from. She had in her hand, when she left and she fell, she tried to catch on to anything she could, and it was a braid of sweetgrass. Not a braid of sweetgrass, but it was actually sweetgrass. And that is what she planted first on Turtle Island. And when she planted that, that's what grew. And that's why we call sweetgrass Mother Earth's hair, And so what she started to do is she started to take all these different seeds that she had that came from, the sky. And she started to plant them all around Turtle Island. And when she had children over time, she's kept telling the same story. And if they didn't know what that story was, they could go to the whale, they could go to the turtle, they could go to the otter, they could go to the eagle, they could go to all these animals that kept this story. And that was what that story, part of the creation story is. It's about Sky Woman. If you haven't heard a woman named Sky Woman, she is a part of the creation of Indigenous peoples. To what I understand from my community here in these lands in the Northeast, that's what we believe, that's what we've been taught, and that's what we understand. But the most important thing, regardless if you believe the story or not, she came with teachings about what our responsibility is here on Earth to take care of that. But she also understood what her connection was to the water. Remember, she fell there, right? And all of the life that was in that. And so she had a true responsibility to that, to carry on that. And Indigenous people from all around the world started to come together and say, wait, you know Sky Woman? Yeah, I know Sky Woman. Oh, shoot, me too. What clan are you from? I'm from the Otter clan. I'm from the Turtle clan. Oh, okay. And she made sure that each of those animals understood their responsibility. And so when we go into our lodges or when we go into our communities, we are to have a clan that we come from. And that muskrat clan has big purpose to all of us too in our lodges. And one thing that the muskrat has also taught us is sacrifice and responsibility and honor and believing in one of ourselves. And that's something that, as small and cute and as storytelling as that is, it's something that I've heard my entire life. And I think this is the first time I've actually shared this publicly, because it's important that we start taking these teachings that we've had for this long and we start sharing it with all of humanity, because that's truly the wisdom that came from our ancestors. But there was a time that, unfortunately, it became illegal, like I mentioned, to tell these stories. And so what happens is some of those instructions get a little distorted. How many of you all are researchers? I think we all are. We like to research some, gossip or some, TMZ stuff, Well, what were they doing? We're all researchers when we need to be, right? Get to the bottom of it. We will be researchers. But at the end of the day, the researchers, if you research back, there were times where we, again, were not allowed to even say we were from any of these clans. And so with each clan, there's a teaching. And so I'll share with you the responsibility a little bit that the Turtle Clan has. One, strong water clan. Land, too. We get to be both, you know. Um, but also we have wisdom. The turtle holds a lot of wisdom. We are considered to be like the intellects in the lodge. And why is that? Well, Sky Woman probably spent the most time with the turtle, you know, told him some stuff, and turtle's wise. They always like to do that in like cartoons and movies. They like to make that turtle very, very, very wise, and so I'm very proud to be Turtle Clan. I'm smart. I'm really smart. I'm Turtle Clan. But that makes me really proud to be able to share that, wisdom, because that Sky Woman story is just one little teeny part of the overall creation story. And so I don't challenge people, but I try to encourage people to go back to wherever your family comes from in the world and go back to whatever original clan they were and what their responsibility was in the community, because sometimes their job was maybe to watch out for anybody coming into the village. Maybe their job was to be the people that go in and they grab the medicines, all of those type of things, so, but at the end of the day, all of that, what is the foundation of all of that? Water, water, water. The connection that she had to have with earth came with water first. All of us are covered or are filled with more than 85 to 89%. It changes depending on which doctor you ask or scientist, right? But at the end of the day, our bodies are filled with water. And so how many of you all know how to swim? Okay. All right. Well, I will say that I am probably the most melanated woman in this room. And so I am comfortable with saying that, and this conversation is about the weight of the water also, because this beautiful installation that we are underneath, that's what it's titled. It's the weight of the water. And I'm sharing with you an indigenous wisdom and perspective here, but at the same time, we're in 2024, and if I was in a room full of people of color, specifically African American people, their hands probably would not be raised if I asked, do you know how to swim? And again, because it was illegal oftentimes for them to access bodies of water or even put their toe in a pool, in a pond, or anything. And so it was actually probably unsafe to teach your child or grandchild how to swim, and it would be better for their lives if they never knew how to swim, because then they would fear water. And if they feared water, they wouldn't go near water, because if they went near water, they'd have a near-death experience and it wouldn't be from water. That is some heavy weight that a lot of us still carry today when it comes to trauma. Indigenous people, we have a lot of trauma because we remember when we wanted to remember those creation stories and we were in the residential schools, we were not allowed to even think about it, That's a weight there, wanting to talk about that creation story and our connection to water and remembering our responsibility. There's a weight. Then there's a weight of the African Americans having to not be able to even get into water or watching a pool drain because they put their foot in the water, and go to jail. There's weight there. There's a lot of weight that's carried. And a lot of times we sort of sweep that under the rug and we sort of pretend as if we are supposed to just get over it. Well, when slavery was abolished and indigenous people began to have what these things are called rights, there was no therapist to really go to talk about this weight, to really deal with it. And today, we're still told to sort of get over it, right? It's important that I share this with you all because this weight is not just our weight, because we are still fighting for clean water for all of humanity, all of it, not just Indigenous peoples. And, marginalized peoples are also not just fighting for this for themselves, but they can't even necessarily go into a place and turn the shower on because of that. And so it's this remembering of these things that help us to heal too. And it's very important that every person begins to do that, because once you can go all the way back to where your people are originally from, just like I'm able to do with the Turtle Clan and the Sky Woman, well, somewhere else in the world, it might not be a Turtle Clan. It might be an ox. It might not even be an ox. It could be the olive tree or whatever that representation is. But there's some sort of connection that has to the land and to the water. And when you bring all of these clans and all of these communities together, we start to understand what our true connection is to one another first, and we can recognize when another has had pain. We understand what our responsibility is to help with healing that pain. And I think that word's called empathy, right? We start to be able to do some of that work. And it makes you feel really good too, but when you start to do that, then you start to actually begin to work together on something that is a serious crisis, which is our water, shortage of water. How many of you all, by a show of hands, know where there are freshwater springs here in the East End? Where can you go to get clean water? Oh, good. That's great. Keep it a secret. Don't tell anybody. I didn't raise my hand because I don't want you guys to know I know. But at the same time, it's very important that we do know that. But I guarantee you, to the 3 people, because I think it was only 3 or 4, it's probably not a lot of springs. It's probably like maybe 1 that you know, right? And you might have known it all your life, and over time you realize it's not as much. You realize there might be a sign there one day that says, "Do not drink from the water." That is a crisis, serious crisis, and our responsibility becomes very, 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 very important to that, to wake up and realize that we are in a serious crisis. We're surrounded by what we call, I think Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, they call it big water. They call it the big water. We call it Kata, the ocean, right? That beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ocean that we're surrounded by here in Long Island. How many of you guys just go to the ocean and you just feel really, really good, Yeah, right? It's powerful. It makes you feel small. It puts you in your place, sometimes. And it's also calming. It's a memory thing there. But at the same time, it's also important to understand that you can't drink salt water. You can't. We are focusing a lot on our big ocean, and there's nothing wrong with that, because ocean sustainability is very bountiful and produces so much for us. We can literally live off of the ocean, but we are made up of 85 to 89% of water, and you can't drink ocean water. You have to drink clean water. So access to clean water is very important, especially here in Long Island. And we remember what those connections are as Indigenous peoples. And so what we do is we typically step out in front of bulldozers when they are either extracting that clean water or they are developing over some of those beautiful fresh springs. And, we don't have the time at that point in time to tell this beautiful creation story to those construction workers. Or we don't have the time to really, write this generous, nice letter and story and book Facebook and send it. You know, that's where our amazing direct action comes into place, where if this group right here said, you know what, I'm tired of seeing the brown water that comes through my, pipes. I'm tired of seeing that. If we all came in here, I think we would all be able to come up with some very strategic ways to make a serious difference here. But it can't be done by just the little Indians in Southampton. And maybe out of those little Indians, probably like what? How many of us show up to those front lines? Like 12 of us out of that? Because they have to work a job, they have to do all of that, and those little 12 natives are trying to make sure that you don't have brown water in your faucets. That's real. That we're seeing all over the country. More recently, we just recently seen, I believe it was January or February, a beautiful woman who I got to meet at Standing Rock. Her name is Tara Hauska. She actually is being sued right now for $4 million as an Indigenous woman who strapped herself to a bulldozer for them to stop desecrating and extracting water out of their beautiful rice fields and the Anishinaabe territory. That creation story that I was telling you about, well, if I were to tell you like where Sky Woman went to and where she planted things, she planted rice in the Anishinaabe territory. So those rice fields are connected to that creation story. And that woman, Tara, is being sued for $4 million. Just being an Anishinaabe woman, remembering her responsibility, remembering her connection, remembering that beautiful story, she's being sued for $4 million from the pipeline company. That's where we're at right now. Whether we can, whether we want to know if that's happening here in the Hamptons, never. It is. It really is. So our connection to that water is not just ours, but it's a responsibility for all humanity. And that weight is something that, those people that typically remember those teachings, that's what we carry. And so my job and my responsibility is to teach this to everyone in my clan, everyone in all of the other clans, and get permission from our tribal, ceremonial people on what I can share about those stories with you all. And the creation story about Sky Woman is one of those. And so that is something that we carry, Unfortunately, it might be legal for me to share the story, but apparently it's not legal for me to stand on my homelands and say, hey, stop, you're getting rid of the last freshwater spring that we have here in Long Island, yo. Which you want to fight? You want to fight? This is my mom. This is my mother here. This land raised me, Those kind of things are happening today. And so what can we do? Sometimes we feel helpless because we don't know these things. The best thing that we can do is become as educated, not about necessarily about what's going on, but become educated on like who you are as a human first, not your tax bracket, not not all of the stuff that's quote unquote on paper, but that clean air that we have to take in every single day to live, and the water that we have to make sure we're having every 3 or 4 days. Somebody's making a serious sacrifice to make sure that that is pure for our lungs. And so what can we do? Well, we have to really understand, like, well, I'm a human first. There is something I can do. Are you in a position of, I don't want to say power, but are you in a position to be able to communicate with somebody that can have the means or resources or maybe know people to do something? Then there is something you can do. You can share this conversation with someone else. And then you can also go to those local communities, those indigenous communities that you're with, and see what is happening, Go and learn also what's happening in the town halls, because sometimes these things happen under our radar, and without what's called tribal consultation. How many of you all have heard of that? Okay. I know these two have. They're always on the front lines with us. Tribal consultation is basically, if those beautiful freshwater springs, I'm assuming that they are in, what is it? I'm assuming they're somewhere here, not that far from here, right? So the closest federally recognized tribe would be Shinnecock. But, if, a lot of people just like to do what's on paper. The state's going to do what's on paper. The developers are going to do what's on paper. The question is, whoever that person is should do what's morally right, right? So they could reach out to the Montauk people. They could reach out to all of the tribes here in Long Island to say, hey, this is some sort of plan that we've had, and we'd like you to be a part of this plan. And what we're trying to do is fix, a pipeline or something that's broken. That's called proper consultation. What typically happens is the plan's already made 5 years prior, and then you get some sort of email that just seems like a rando email, and then it just has like this 130-page paper on a $10 million development idea on how to develop in your homelands, and they say you have what's called 30 days to review. And so typically, on day 23, you see the email and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait, this isn't proper tribal consultation. And so that's why you see a lot of indigenous peoples from Standing Rock. How many of you all have seen or heard or are a little privy to what took place, just by a show of hands? I like to know so that I'm not like saying something that you do know. But what everybody saw there was because tribal consultation wasn't done properly. You have to follow these particular guidelines, and those are in place because you have leaders years ago that really understood what their connection and their responsibility was to this land. And so they went to those administrations, plural, remember I just said that, right? Because we predate the doctrine of discovery, we predate the United States, we predate Southampton, and we predate the state of New York. So we have to go through plural administrations to finally, over time and generation, as people become more conscious of things, they finally said, you know what? We're going to put something called tribal consultation in place, and we're going to do this. Now, do they know how? Not necessarily, but if we can start to take ourselves and put ourselves into that humanitarian standpoint on what we have to do for the earth, then whatever job you have, you can do something that contributes to the betterment of this planet. That is very, very important to do. So this all comes from, those teachings. And every single day, we don't necessarily get it right as humans. I'm forever learning. I don't know everything. I am not going to say that I am the youngest person in here, because I do see some people that look, about my age. I'm not going to say my age, but I will say that I still have a lot to learn. I'm still calling my elders and asking about things. I'm still learning. I'm still researching. I'm still coming and asking about, all of these things, that how can I be a better human here on earth to contribute to making sure that in 30 to 40 years from now, not only is that creation story still told to those people, but people are seeing some of those springs start to be a lot more healthy, some of them starting to pop up, our waters. The amount of money that this world has, if we were to start putting all of that towards the technologies and the sciences and the research towards a natural way, but including the indigenous people that have kind of been here doing this for a long time, because these new cool terms, regenerative and sustainability, I don't even think my language has a word for regenerative. I don't think we have a word for sustainability, but there are these new things that sort of still erase the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. And that essentially does create a little bit more of what we call present day trauma. You have insidious trauma. You have historical trauma. You have generational trauma. And when we experience things like that, the erasure, we experience present day trauma on top of all of the other layers. Remember, I said there wasn't a therapist, right? There wasn't a therapist at that time. Now we're starting to really kind of be able to do that work, and we are very grateful for that, because then it's unlocking those memories of those creation stories. It's unlocking those memories on how we're actually supposed to really be here, without that trauma there and being present. But it's all of our responsibility to do that. And so here in New York, specifically, around this land is surrounded by water. And I'm gonna tell you one story, one big, huge, giant story. It's also a little part of the creation story, but a different area, different part of it. How many of you all have heard of a giant named Moshup? Okay, Moshup. Moshup lived in an area called Gayhead, Martha's Vineyard. Lived where the Aquina people lived. And Moshup had a wife and lived there, and they had kids. Moshup was this really, 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 really big giant. And he lived right off of the cliffs there. Right, he had a cave that he lived right off of those cliffs. Moshup could actually go fishing and just take the whales by his hand, you know? And what he would do is he would like smash him up against the cliffs there. And that's why our cliffs, Montauk, Block Island, as well as Gayhead there, they're red clay, right? Because of the blood from the whales. That's a part of how the land started to be, created. And once we've seen that, then we know where Moshup actually spent time. But Moshup actually made it all the way down here to Long Island. You know how we know? His foot puddles. He made puddles with his feet. Made the Long Island Sound. He made the inlet. He made all these like areas, and that's how we're able to know. And with that, that huge giant, that's what connected what's called the Anishinaabeg people. How many of y'all have heard of the Anishinaabeg? Okay. Anishinaabeg means the family, and that family was all the way from Maine, Nova Scotia, Canada, and Micmac territory, all the way down into the Carolinas. We didn't get down there yet. We didn't. We did have an alligator song that came up to us, though. But we didn't make it all the way down there, the Anishinaabeg. And at the time, people have heard of this Paleo-Indian. You ever heard of Paleo-Indian? Well, the scientists and the anthropologists, that's what they called the Anishinaabeg people. We followed the caribou. There wasn't a lot of water at the time. And so as the glacial rock started to melt, you started to see the water. We started to follow the caribou. We started to grow plants. Moshup was able to make these beautiful puddles. The landscape was able to be made. And so I know I'm home when I'm walking around and going places, but after a while, when it's all start to be developed and destroyed, it no longer sort of looks like home. And so when we start to have all these things that go on, it also erases those stories too, and the responsibilities and connections that come with those stories. And so that's another reason why we don't really like too much development, because, it's a small island. If he was just jumping around, I mean, one thing to walk and create a puddle, but if he just was like moshing it up and just moving around, we'd have more water today than we do now. We're seeing more water today. So that story about that giant is still a big part of that creation story, and how certain areas started to move around, and you have those mountains and you have all those, levels to things. But it's all still a part of that creation story and our connection as Indigenous people to that, those stories. And we never put borders between Massachusetts, where Moshup slept, right? And you knew he came all the way down here because as you got to Long Island, the treetops were not as big as Massachusetts. They were not as big as Connecticut. They said that he started to eat the tops of the trees as he got to Long Island. So you can start to see the trees start to flatline. How many of you all have ever taken that beautiful drive from not taking the ferry over, but sort of driving up into the north? It changes, doesn't it? And there's, those are our beliefs, our understandings, and, all of the life that's here on earth, is life because of water. And so are we. And we haven't forgotten that. So I just wanted to be able to share some of that wisdom with each and every one of you. But I want to do a small little exercise because we can't have a conversation about water without water, right? In our community, we understand that water is life. Nippy, nuppy, nippy, nuppy. Nippy is what we say. As you go kind of south, you hear them say nuppy. The Powhatan Confederation, Powhatan communities, even some of the Lenape and the Munsee speaking people, all the way up into sort of Massachusetts, the word water is exactly the same. Because that's the Anishinaabe, that's the family. So what I want everybody to do is I want everyone to take this cup of water and hold it, and we're all going to take a drink, because we need to be able to give some sort of thanks. And as you're drinking this water, really understand, like, it's a part of who you are, too. So when we're taking that, it's also helping to cleanse. Because sometimes as I share some of these teachings, and maybe some divine instructions, sometimes as it comes through, and it's appropriate to share, I also understand that it can seem to be very foreign to you. And sometimes that develops what's an uncomfortability to hear, to sit with, because as humans, sometimes we just want to protect ourselves. I even changed my social media algorithms now because I really don't like all the stuff that's on social media. But, the real world is a lot of the history that has happened too. And now what we do with what we know, taking this, cleansing ourselves, getting to a higher level of consciousness is extremely important to be able to do. And so doing that together in sort of like communion, I guess, is very important because it sort of washes, renews, cleanses. Water is one of the best medicines. My parents look very young, like very young, and I really want to look like them when I get older. And anytime they get sick or something happens, it's always water. My dad's like, yeah, just water. I'm like, dude, you need something else besides water. You need to put some like herbs in it, some mullein, I don't know. But whatever it is, water helps because water is life. And when we drink this water, we need to be very, very, very grateful for it. And so after we drink this cup of water, I have mine. I usually drink out of copper here. And that's how we carry our water, in copper. And I also am a water carrier. Carrying water is a real task. Some of the elders in here might remember back in the day when you had to carry it. I know my mother did when she lived on Shinnecock in the 60s and 70s. They didn't have running water here in the Hamptons on Shinnecock, to think about that. So think about it. Some of the people you might have went to high school didn't have water at home on Shinnecock. And so we have that now, and that's our connection to it together. No matter what color you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your account looks like, at the end of the day, we all have to drink clean water. And so we all have to have not just a possession of it, and I just want to grab all of this for me. You realize that there's just a little bit in there, right? So that I think it all came from almost like one bottle or a bottle and a half, because one person could have just drank the whole bottle. But it's so important. So as you drink this, I want you to just really drink it with intention. So whatever came up, while I was talking a little bit, just drink that intention. Really have really good intentions while you're drinking that water. It's very important to renew yourself, and then we'll go into a little a mindful thing. So while you guys do that, I'm gonna sing a little song, and the song is it's a water song actually. Nipi wabo endayan Aqua misqui nipi wabo, nipi wabo endayan. Aqua misqui nipi wabo. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya ho. 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 Make sure you use all of the water. So even at the end, pour that cup over, put it on your hands, wipe your hands with it, put it on your hair. Don't let a single drop be wasted. Appreciate everyone allowing me to just share, right? You guys can hear my voice, right? Yeah, it's a little softer. I really appreciate you all allowing me to be able to share just some wisdom. I do a lot of professional types of talks. I wanted this to be a little different. It's a Friday. Everybody comes from a different background. It's going to have a rough week. Who wants to look at a screen? I know I don't. I'm already putting together too many of those kind of things for work and all different kinds of things. In the digital space too, we need to sometimes just be away from it. So whatever we can do to get ourselves to remember our connection, remember our responsibility, I really want to be intentional about that. So I didn't want to have any notes or anything. I just kind of wanted to speak from my heart today. So I appreciate you being very present and going through that with me. And so what I'd like you all to do now is to hold your cup, put your cups kind of to the side. We'll make sure that they go in the right appropriate place. Not sure if you guys recycle or if you don't recycle, okay? But so we want to make sure that if you can, uncross your legs if you can, and get into a very comfortable place, put your feet flat on the ground. How many of you all have actually done some breathwork or meditation before? Okay? All right. As I'm learning that, I practice this in my every single day life, all the time. Which, to count the 10 things you got taught when you was a kid, it works. But I also recognize that if it's not something that you practice, it does become, a little challenging. But it's important because everything that was shared today, like we said, I brought out something very ancient. You may not be able to see it, but some kind of emotion, you felt something a little bit. You felt happiness. You probably remember the time when you were being close. Something that old is very, 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 very soon. So not to walk away from this circle, getting back into our Robert Rule order and rolling into to the chaos of the Friday night here in Sag Harbor. That's not what we want to do immediately. So we want to be able to take it in, together, have that order together, but do a little mindfulness. So what I'd like you all to do is just close your eyes, get into a comfortable space. Don't worry about anything at this moment, Don't worry about who you're sitting next to. Don't worry about if somebody doesn't have their eyes closed. Don't worry about if someone's looking at you. again. This time when you're taking that breath, I want you to hold it a little bit. So take it in. Hold it. Let it go. And as we're doing this exercise a little bit, I want you to be very mindful about whatever pain your body is feeling, your mind is feeling, your emotions have been feeling, the lostness sometimes in our spirit, the wandering of our spirits. I want you to, in one breath, call it in. And as you let it out, connect it all. Let's try that one more time. Think about all of those directions of your spirit, mind, body, emotions. And let it out. Start to realize that you're starting to feel what's called whole. Being whole. The oneness of yourself. Recognize that oneness of yourself has so much power in the entire universe. That you're so interconnected. In our language, we say, for me, the common law, all of my relations, all of my relatives, that your breath is connected to all life. And that makes you so powerful. That makes you have a connection with every life on earth. The beautiful plants. I want you to think about those beautiful plants that, you're starting to see. Take your mind to that place right now. Take yourself to a very natural place. As you're taking yourself to that place, think about the quietness of that place. Think about how that place makes you feel. Maybe it's a pond. Maybe it's a lake. Maybe it's a forest. Maybe it's a river. Maybe you've never been there before, but you remember it somehow. Whatever that is, think about your connection to that place and how you just feel like you never want to leave. I want you to think about how all of those places are also and you're powerful because you're there right now. That's how you are. As we're thinking about those places, make sure you're taking that breath and giving thanks to those trees that are there and all that carbon's a question. Those trees that help you to plant the air, all the plants that live there, the water, whatever that sounds like, whatever that sounds like, whatever feels there. Understand that you're part of that, you're connected to that.
holding that place that you know is not great. Start to begin to not necessarily process, but gather the medicines in your mind, in your baskets, in your bags, whatever that sacred place is that you store sacred knowledge, that you get to keep that with you forever. That ancient story that was shared by an Indigenous woman here. And wherever that place is, hopefully you can go there, but you can also help to preserve that place so that you can help to tell a story back to the next generation of people so they can have similar memories. Whatever emotions that come up sometimes, it's okay to let that out. Whether it's tears, but always with breath and a clean glass cup of water. Whenever you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes and start to move around a little bit.
Well, I know there might be maybe some questions, but if there are, you are more than welcome to ask. We can pass the mic around, but if you have any questions, comments, it's okay. A little bit of the music is pretty cool, isn't it? I love it, that sound of water. I wanted to have something just that water sound, I'd like to have live plants, when I'm doing talks. But in this case, we're not talking about plants, we're talking about water. So we can have as much water as possible that we don't have to run to the restroom. But if you have any questions, raise your hand, I can bring the mic to you, or comments or whatever might have come up.
I've had this question for a long time. Do we grow sweetgrass here on Long Island? Do we have it?
Yes, it does grow naturally. It likes marshes and sort of wetlands. It likes, moisture in the air, but it doesn't grow abundantly. It is an indigenous plant. Due to a lot of the invasive plants, it sort of struggles a little bit. But, there's a lot of reintroducing that we're trying, but it's not always thriving when it's reintroduced.
Are there any projects, developments, anything that's going on the East End that the Shinnecock are currently concerned about?
There are actually a couple of organizations within our tribe. One of them is called Warriors of the Sunrise. If you want to follow them on Instagram, they typically probably do the best job out of everyone when really getting out whatever that fight is. There's the Shinnecock kelp farmers. I know right now they are physically have a physical presence in the water, and so they come up with a lot of different things. And then recently, National Grid was building a gas shutoff valve right at the foot of what we call the hill, on what's East Gate going into Main Street of Southampton. And so they started to build that, and I believe it was December 30th or December 28th. I kind of went out there and put my prayers down, and they all scattered in their cars. And then January 2nd, we went out to put out signs and just put our prayers out there. And so they have not done any further development since January 2nd. But if you want to make a call to them and say, get your stuff off of Shinnecock's land, that's still a pretty big fight. It's National Grid. And the other is probably on a very high level. Tribal leaders in the entire Northeast are really battling the saving the whales right now because of the offshore development that's taking place. Tribal consultation, we all learned about, wasn't done exactly properly about 8 years ago. So those are some of the current things that are happening. Yes, the offshore one.
Thank you very much for sharing all that you shared. I wanted to say just a couple things that some years ago I started, touching and talking and listening to the water. And now when I go to any town, if there's water nearby, I go to the water and I say some prayers or talk to it or whatever. And it just changes. Like today, I had a really busy day. I came into town, I got my coffee, but then I went to the water and just that helped me center. And I feel like you said, you connect with everything. So each different little town, whenever there's water, it's like part of the routine. So I don't just go grocery shopping. So it makes, it sort of decommodifies my consciousness. And I just want to mention, people can look it up, but if you've never heard of the Kogi people, they're indigenous people of the mountains in Colombia, the Kogi, and they have no books, but they know how to read water. They can literally read the water. Something to think about.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful and generous talk. I was wondering if you have or would consider involving yourselves as Indigenous people with the problem of there being the Arizona land development plan for the Pine Barrens, which is, of course, critical to our sole source aquifer. And that project was put through in a very sneaky way by Jay Schneiderman. And it's now happening. It was stopped, and now it's begun again. And I just wonder if you think that there's any possibility of stopping it, because I think it's a complete, hideous, horrible ecological disaster.
Thank you. It's interesting, these little fights and battles and stuff. It's like whack-a-mole. It really is. You have missing murder Indigenous women over here. You have clean water over here. Then you're still trying to take our land. So it's like the more people you have, the more you can say, okay, this group, you guys focus on that. Boom, boom, boom. Just like any organization and board. But when you only have like a few people that have been fighting for something for so long, you kind of get tired. I'm very well aware of that situation, not on the Jay Schneiderman part, just not. However, I do know that often, so you have the Indigenous Environmental Network. That's another good network to really look into. You have Honor the Earth, which is another one that's really good. They've kind of coined this term called green colonialism. Green colonialism is sort of like the new age settler colonialism, because what we're seeing is the same way that the settler colonialism was starting to happen after colonialism. these new green sort of industries are extracting land, stealing it, or displacing the people that are on there. Same sort of like behaviors, but doing it with a greenwashing sort of mentality. So Honor the Earth has sort of coined this term called green colonialism. It's pretty interesting and unique to use. But there's also a lot of lawsuits that tribes are starting to get very intelligent. They must come from turtle clans. They must come from the turtle clan. You know, you saw the little hip. That felt really good about that one. Yeah, because I think it's Washington State, Oregon. One of the, I think three or four of those tribes actually came together, and they sued Exxon and another gas company. And the suit was for climate liability risks, which is interesting because they really don't care if that's your land or not. I don't care about that. But the climate liability risk is that people are not really aware of the harsh, results that come from these. And so you're deceiving the public. And so that's what makes it a climate liability risk. And so you're able to or at least sue, whether they were winning or not. But they sued in November or the end of December. Yep.
Thank you for bringing that up, April. And I'd also like to bring up another challenge that we're all facing. The Southampton Stony Brook campus is going to be transformed on your land, close to the territory, into a hospital. The Stony Brook Southampton campus. Yeah, all of you, I asked to participate in objecting to Stony Brook University, who were given all that land with our tax dollars to keep it to be a university, has no undergraduate students on it anymore. And their plans are to build a hospital on top of this aquifer that feeds the territory fresh water, as well as where I live, a mile west. And to compound that, I'm sorry, I'm very emotional about this. Our state government wants to transform it into 500 units of affordable housing. Any of you that travel past through my neighborhood are aware of the traffic congestion, which is a lot of pollution. Just imagine trying to get through past the canal. I fought for 10 years against that townhouse development, or actually 14 years to stop it. And now, added to the congestion in my neighborhood and on your ancestral lands, it's going to be 500 units of affordable housing and a hospital on top of an aquifer. What does that say about the commitment to climate disruption, to make a change by our state university system, who just got a huge grant to combat climate change? They're on Governor's Island. They moved the whole program off the campus, which was studying the East End. And instead, I keep repeating myself, I'm sorry, but a hospital with medical waste and 500 units of affordable housing, no undergraduate students or programming. It's all gone. Please, everybody here, take note of that. And if you know anyone in the state government or our local government, please say something. And did you know about this? Well, I attended an express sessions where Stony Brook had the whole room filled with their staff who are all saying, yes, let's go ahead and do this. And there are 5 of us from the community that objected. But you can imagine that there weren't too many There wasn't anyone from Stony Brook that had any interest in what we had to say. And they have no commitment to our neighborhood.
Well, thank you for sharing. You know, sometimes I think Creator just kind of puts you in certain positions or removes you from certain positions so that way you can be prepared for the next battle. You know, that definitely is, because those are connected to our burial grounds. Yeah, all the hills. So yeah, that's definitely something to be talking to our elders about.
Thank you so much. As an expression from my community, I just want to say Mado, which is like an affirmation and a thank you. And I want to know, what brings you joy? What inspires you?
What brings me joy is really water. I love paddling. My favorite place on earth is being in a canoe or a vessel on water. There's a specific place. Every almost body of water does it, where like the current and the wind, and then you can actually sit still and you don't drift. That is my favorite place to be on earth. And so that really it brings like tears to my eyes. The last time I was in a place like that was about the beginning of March. It was really, really, really nice. And if you follow my Instagram, I'm always somewhere outside. It was really nice that day. And my cousin said, hey, let's go out. Let's get the kayaks. And I went out and we stood there. And I was like, I was just explaining to her about how the eagles were starting to come back. And as I said that, 2 eagles were starting to fly like over us, right over Shinnecock. And so they were sort of like headed around Hetty's Creek area. And they were flying for a while, and there was this hawk. And I was explaining to my cousin, I was like, well, the eagles are not going to fight that hawk. They're going to just keep going and going. And we got to sit there in that place watching 2 eagles. But that's truly what brings me joy. Thank you so much. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. My great-grandmother was Algonquin, and her spirit is here with you tonight. I have 2 things that I would just like to speak to if there's any energy or groups that of like mind. I have a concern with all of the pesticides and the little yellow flags that I find all around here in our village in Sag Harbor, and the spraying of the trees and the flowers. And also have a concern about the light pollution and the intensity of our street lamps, if there's anything that can be done. So if there's other communities that feel that way, if we could come together and brainstorm.
I'm right with you. I don't like light pollution at all either. That's why I like to go as far as I can to the south. Sometimes I can hear the ocean on the res, and I just go out there, and I just like to see no light pollution. I just left DC a couple days ago to speak about policy, but specifically on descheduling cannabis. And so one of the things that's important is to really pay attention to what these policies are. Plants, not just cannabis, but there are so many plants that are so regulated, particularly in this state of New York. New York is like one of the most highly regulated states, not just for cannabis, but for sassafras and so many others. I don't think you can actually grow cotton here in New York. There's certain plants that they won't let you say a certain word. If you go to New York City, there's all these pesticides and things like that, but the pesticides essentially kill the indigenous plants, and they help the invasive plants grow, and it interrupts the biodiversity that you begin to lose. So I'm right with you, but I would think that's why I said who's a researcher, but nerd out on policy, nerd out on policy and just really, really go in there, because sometimes going and speaking to whatever person is put in charge as the signatory, the pen carrier, they're just gonna, but they're also going to talk to their attorneys and figure out what can they not do, what can they do within the law. And those attorneys' jobs are to pay attention to the changes of those policies on a day-to-day basis. So if you begin to affect the change in the policy, well, next time you go in there, you're like, yeah, did you see that new policy that they have now? You guys can't do that anymore. That's going to move differently. That's what it's going to take. Real organized minds, organized votes, organized money, and organized people. That's what really, really moves those people with the pen. They don't like the emotion. They don't really care about it too much because they don't have to follow it on paper.
Thank you so much for this talk and to everyone for sharing space. I wanted to ask you where we can get your book that was mentioned at the beginning.
Right when you all walk out, there are some little handouts that I had over there. So there's a QR code on there. It has like my website. There's also my Instagram is on there. So the book, it's an ebook right now. I'm very intentional about trying to find like the right publisher because I really want it to be curated a certain way. So if you guys know some really cool, unique publishers, let me know because I really, really want to have like this beautiful coffee style book. But it's an ebook right now. It has beautiful photos in it, and it's Indigenous plant medicines. Yep, I think we're good on time now. Thank you so much. Yay.